Hey, welcome back. Up to this point in my Foundations series, we've been talking about agency, identity, and boundaries, which are not small things. They're super important. But today I want to talk about faith as the footing for your soul, where your meaning and your security are actually held. The framework for a grounded life does require looking at your agency, your identity, your boundaries. But today I want to move us underneath all of that to where real footing is held, in other words. Because at some point, personal growth reaches a limit if you don't have a deeper footing spiritually. No matter what you believe about God or Christianity or how much you've been harmed by a church or a religion or faith, the reality is you are a spiritual being. And at some point, the knowledge of a God who is over everything, a sovereign God who created all this and is over all of this, an understanding of that is required in order to find deeper, meaningful living, finding your real footing for your heart. So absolute security for your heart. At some point in your own strength and power, without looking at the spiritual side of things, personal growth reaches a limit, the limit of your capacity. So there needs to be something else out there that helps you with your capacity. You can know what's yours to carry. You can become more yourself. You can live with clearer boundaries and still feel unsettled at a soul level. We were created by a God who left his mark in us. So that restlessness isn't a flaw. It's not something still broken in you. It's a signal. It's a signal of the God in you who, through all of the circumstances that you're dealing with, the whole point of the story actually is that he wants access to your heart to walk with you in that faith space. So it's a signal. And it points us toward the deeper question that every human being eventually has to face. Where am I placing my ultimate meaning and security? So let's talk a little bit about the inescapable question of the soul. Whether or not you consider yourself religious, spiritual, or faith-oriented, this is unavoidable. Every person lives from a center, from a soul. We have something spiritual in us. Something answers the question, what makes my life make sense? What tells me I'm okay? What do I rely on when everything else is unstable? For some, it's relationships. For others, control, certainty, success, stability. Even self-reliance can become a form of worship. The soul is always looking for something to rest upon. The question isn't whether you believe, it's what you believe will hold you when nothing else will. This is one of the most important distinctions we can make. There is a difference between making meaning and receiving meaning. When we make meaning, it's fragile. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on the relationships. It depends on our health or our own consistency, our own power. When we receive meaning, that's what steadies us. Not because it eliminates the pain, but it anchors our pain in something important. It anchors us when pain arrives. Because faith at its core is a decision to stop carrying the full weight of your own existence. not because you're incapable, but because you were never meant to be your own foundation. And when I say that God is after your heart, He's constantly set before every single person in every single day the choice of life or death, to choose life or choose death, to choose what is wisdom or choose what is foolishness, to step into a process with God, a life lived with God, or to step into doing what is right in our own eyes and our power. That's what faith is. That's what God has set in front of you. And honestly, you were never meant to be your own foundation. That's the doing what's right in your own eyes. Real meaning comes from the God that created you. So another thought is faith is not a leash. This is where many people get tangled. So many of us were taught, I was taught, that faith is presented as this pressure to accept Jesus into your heart so that you can go to heaven, or that you have to believe specific certain things so that you can be absolved of your sin. It's a pressure rather than a being. Do more, to endure more, to endure longer, to sacrifice harder. I was taught that when you do, actually the list was more about the don'ts. When you don't do all of these things so that you can look like a Christian, that's what faith was. The do more, endure more, give up so much more so that you can look like a Christian and God will approve of you. But a healthy faith doesn't shrink you. Not like that version of faith that can totally exhaust your soul trying to keep up with all the things that you're not supposed to do or trying to get away with them in the dark. So a healthy faith grounds you. It doesn't demand that you give up yourself. It's actually learning who you are, accepting who you've been created to be, and taking the courage. It gives you the courage to walk in it. So it invites surrender of what you were never meant to control, other people, the circumstances, the outcomes. So it invites surrender of the outcomes so that you can be who God created you to be. Not self-erasure, but other control. Control of the world, control of the circumstances. It's a surrender of trying to make the world safe, and an ownership. Faith is actually the ownership of becoming, resting in who God created you to be, and taking the courage and building the strength to be it with Him. God is your foundation, not a substitute foundation. So a clarifying question to ask here is my faith asking me to abandon myself? Or is it asking me to trust something larger than myself? Those are actually not the same thing. So I know part of this foundational talk has been owning yourself, trusting in yourself, learning to put into place your own boundaries. So this might sound confusing. Is my faith asking me to abandon myself or to trust something larger than myself? What I'm saying is the trusting God to be part of the story, that faith element of it, isn't about giving up who you are. It's about walking it out with the power of God, walking with God through your story. So God is not a substitute for identity. He's not a substitute for boundaries or agency. He's the foundation that makes those things even possible. Moral absolutes come from Him. So in order to have identity or boundaries or agency, it's all grounded in the God who created it to be possible. When faith is used to bypass your selfhood. It becomes spiritual bypassing, right? When faith is used to bypass your agency to be who God created you to be, it becomes distorted. When faith is rightly ordered, it strengthens your capacity to live with honesty. It's what gives you the strength, the wherewithal to walk out actually who you are. And honestly, to go back to what I said about, how we are taught to follow all the right rules. In my case, it was to what you don't do. You don't do all these things to look like something. When you're walking with faith rightly ordered, you are walking in your capacity to live honestly, and you look like it. So it's not trying to do all these things to look like it. It's simply living so that you look like it. You have the capacity to tell the truth, to walk in the truth, to grieve what needs to be grieved, and to choose courage. You have something in you that gives you the courage to walk in what is true. A soul anchored in God doesn't need to control the outcomes, which I know sounds terrifying. But when your soul is anchored in the God who holds you, you are not distracted by the outcomes. You put that energy into living aligned with who He has created you to be, and you're trusting Him with the outcomes. That is your security. Many people think faith is about certainty, security. It's not. It is about orientation. And so it answers the question, where do I turn when I don't have any answers? In whom do I find my answers? My strength. A faith that only works when life makes sense isn't faith. It might be agreement. It might be, trying to tap into a tool. But soul level faith is steady when outcomes are unclear. That's why I call it security. When you are grounded in the God that holds you, you hold steady even when life is chaotic or relationships are unresolved, and even when the future feels ambiguous or frightening. Not because it explains everything, not because it gives you the assurity that you're not going to hurt or be harmed or lose things, but because it locates you, it centers you, it holds you. It is resting without resigning. There's a difference between resting in God and resigning yourself to harm, stagnation, or self-abandonment. Again, if your faith is telling you to give up something, that's resigning yourself to harm, stagnation, or self-abandonment. But there's a difference between resting in God and resigning yourself to those things. Rest says, I trust God with what I cannot control. Resignation says, I stop participating in my own life. I go along to get along. I endure more. I pray more. I wait for God to step in. Faith does not require resignation, actually. Faith actually supports courage, and it sustains honesty, and it provides footing when action is costly and disruptive. Think about how disruptive Jesus was, actually. So we're talking about faith. Who was Jesus the most disruptive to? The church people. The people who had all the right answers to all the things, all the questions. That's who Jesus was the most disruptive to. And he walked with a lot of integrity. He was God. But it cost him everything to walk with that. Think about that. So as we close today, I want to offer you this grounding thought. You do not have to manufacture meaning for your life, meaning, purpose, or direction. You do not have to figure out what God's will is for you. You are allowed to receive it. He puts himself right here with you to walk out this life with him. You do not have to figure that out or manufacture it. You simply receive it. So faith at its healthiest gives your soul a place to stand so you can live, choose, and grow without carrying the unbearable weight of being your own savior. Carry this question with you this week. What am I currently asking to give me the kind of security only God can provide? In our next conversation, we'll talk about hope, not as wishful thinking, but as something rooted, resilient, and honest, something grounded in your faith. Hope to see you there. Thanks.